And good morning. Welcome to Small Business Chat. Hello, Christelle.
Hello, Karen.
We're switching roles now because we are talking all about demystifying PR for your business. And because Christelle is the expert in this, we're going to be running a series all about PR, trying to demystify it, how business owners can better understand what it is, how it's evolved over the years, so you can use it for maximum impact, and also where it fits in with your business objectives. So we're looking at questions like, what is the cost of PR, how PR works, the role of it supporting your marketing and business goals, and how to measure and evaluate the success of PR as well. So, Christelle, you were saying you did put a post out on LinkedIn, and what were kind of the top things that came up for you?
Well, actually, it was quite funny. I thought, well, let's see what the biggest barrier would be, because a lot of people will come up to me and say, oh, we need PR. And then you ask them why they think they need PR. And it's like a little bit hazy. And you're like, you're coming to me. Like, I don't. So I asked the questions, what is the biggest barrier? I took the top three based on a study on the state of PR in 2021 as to what might be barriers. And it turns out the cost of PR is a big issue, because quite rightly, you're hiring an expert, aren't you? So again, it could be out of their price range as to what they think they need. And there's so many more flexible options nowadays. But also what I found really interesting, most people were stuck on all four of those topics. So the cost, how it works, how it can really impact my business, and also measurement and effectiveness, like how do we measure PR? So actually cost and measurement, which actually signals quite a lot to me, because if you're spending that money and you can't justify it, then of course you're going to have barriers to it. So, I mean, again, you're going to do a series because each subject or each question I felt was good enough for like 20-30 minute chat to go, right, let's break it down for you. But yeah, it did make me it was really interesting to see, and I thought, well, this is going to end up being a little mini series, isn't it? So here we go.
Definitely. And we've done a mini series on website design, which is kind of my specialty. So it's great to be able to do this. So I hope you can't hear that drilling. I did tell them to try and be quiet between 10 and 20 past while we do this. So I'm going to just mute off in between after I've asked the questions. So so what is PR then? First question, let's get an overview of what actually PR is.
Yeah, so the official definition of PR is it's about reputation, managing what you say, what you do, and how others think of you. And that is in essence, what it is. And a lot of people go, well, that's nice, but so what? Like, how does that impact the bottom line? But ultimately, and in a way, I feel like PR is coming into an age, because we are really drilling down on a company, its ethics, its values. But also it's like, I want to know a little bit more about the company and what's behind the scenes. So in that respect, I feel like PR is coming to an age where we do want to make sure that what we're communicating. And for me, I felt that the study with that I was quoting, the state of PR, by Muckrack, actually, and they turned around and said that PRs feel that the definition of PR needs to evolve and change because people don't seem to get it. So it's like managing the relationships in your different publics, and building those reputation. But a lot of people will think of it as media. But for me, and I've said this on various chats, haven't I? I always say that your publics, you have like 5 different publics before you get to the media. So you'll have internal comms, which is something that PR does and manages. That's a segment on its own. You have sort of like community relations, how we look after our neighbours, how we look after our communities, our customers. There's the communication between there. You might have stakeholders or investment. You might have industry. Then you might have actually external marketing sources. So it might be media, it might be partnerships. So yeah, there's so much to manage there that if you aren't, and you don't need a professional to manage those relationships for you. It's just for you to understand how you're managing those relationships, and just being very aware of there needs to be some sort of thought and consideration, and just really, from my point of view, like treat them how you would like to be treated. It's really simple. Like sometimes you could just break it down to that. But yeah, that to me is how I would explain PR.
Okay, that's a good overview. So what would you say is, why is PR so difficult to understand? I mean, people just sort of go, oh, I don't understand, and sort of, like marketing, people understand now, but why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's a bit naughty, but I like to use this analogy, in the difference between marketing and PR. But I like to say, PR is marketing is the person in the room that shouts out, "I'm amazing, I'm amazing," and the naughty version is, "I'm amazing in bed," because like nobody would want to shout that out about themselves. But marketing is all about that. And then PR is like the whole practice of getting everybody else in the room to say, "Oh my God, they're amazing," So that to me is that it really does a switch of actually there is that direct approach to marketing, or there's PR where there is so much more about influencing, or perhaps even trying to build up your advocates, that word of mouth. Like that's where I think the more powerful alliance is, that word of mouth, rather than I've just told you, now you have to believe me. But the funny thing itself is that today, like there's such a storytelling element. So we talk about communication, we talk about telling a story. And this is why, again, like you say, we have gone from branding, we've gone to websites. We talk about we've talked about like social in these chats. But the way that PR stands out and to get that word of mouth recommendation is there's such a storytelling element to it that I don't think anything else that they'll do it. They'll really look at what the story is, goes back to the why. And I didn't realize that that's how I worked, until my friend Lena turned around to me and went, "You need to watch Simon Sinek. You already do this. You just couldn't put the framework together." And I always tell the story behind every brand or every business owner that I've worked with. And the journalists will find that much more enticing than about the product, because you're building up that story. So, I mean, PR in itself, in an industry about reputation, and this is why it's so difficult to understand, it has its own worst reputation. So like you were saying, it's like, why is it so difficult to understand? Well, let's see what's out there in the media. We have AdFab, which, as brilliantly funny as that is, it is a caricature of what we do. Or we have like publicists that are on TV that we think, oh, okay, that's what they're doing. They're there to try and get, celebrities' fame. But actually, it's evolved over time. It's got its own story. So PR was very much a news service. Like I think the first PR example was in like the 1800s, where a rail company sort of put a press release. They sent a press release to a newspaper to just publicize some news. And I think that was like the first recorded press release. But then over like the 50s, 60s, the grandfather of PR was Edward Bernays, and he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And he thought, hang on a second, he was like fascinated with psychology. And he actually thought, well, actually, if psychology could be used for war and propaganda, why couldn't we do this in peaceful times? And actually, it was about essentially manipulation. Like, how can we manipulate how people think in order to drive some positive results for like companies or brands? So, some of his famous campaigns would be Lucky Strike cigarettes. So how to get women smoking. This is all controversial. How to get women smoking. And Lucky Strike had a green, a very fashionable green cover on the packet. So they got all these women and these models to light up, because and the cigarette was then used as this whole torch for freedom during sort of like women's rights issues. So again, getting these models in the same lucky green, like colouring, association, and then also showing this act of defiance. They're like the men, they can smoke, we're up there, look at us, we're feminists. Forget about how awful tobacco is. But yeah, how to manipulate and actually what's the consumer psychology behind it. And then he also did, the brilliant one that I always laugh at, but it's like, instant cake mix. So what would happen is he would, I think they took Betty Crocker even, that's the brand, isn't it? It's like back in America. And housewives didn't like the fact that you could get the cake in a mix. So what he decided was add an egg. Just add an egg, not needed, just add an egg. And then you've got, and they felt like they were baking, and then obviously sales took off just by, you know, that perception of what you were doing, like taking the perception of, well, it's not real cake if you didn't actually do anything with it. So it's got a fascinating story behind it. But I mean, the sad reality is that, you know, with manipulation, there is a line there with moral compass. So, you know, nowadays PR companies aren't, you know, we're very much trying to look at much more strategic comms, ethical, you know, you've seen this rise of like CSR, like we've got to give back, you know, with good companies, but it is now a role of leadership. So, you know, this reputation, your opinions, what you're putting out, you know, how do we step you up as a leader? How do we profile you as a leader? So it's really evolved along the lines. And of course, with digital, it's expanded even more. And actually, I found it really interesting, the jump to how PR is expected to report back, to how the activity links back to the website, and how it's expected to social media, which goes back into the measurement side of it all. So it really has evolved itself, and I think that it's difficult to understand because we're not very clear on it, but historically it's evolved. So, you know, where does it lie? And I think with digital and also marketing in general, everyone thinks that they can do a bit of everything. You know, a PR can say that they do social, an SEO companies say that they can do PR, but I think that PR will have a particular approach to doing its social or its content, how it will do its profiling, how it will deliver its PR objectives. And instead of now sending in a press release to a journalist to say, will you feature this? It's really much more collaborative. Like, how are we going to work with media partners, the community, the industry, to profile you in a way that is in everybody's benefit?
And I think as well, there's a lot of stuff that's coming out, so they're always looking for stories. So it's making sure that you're there all the time to try and pick up on those and then send stuff in, isn't it? Rather than it's kind of being reactive to it, or a bit proactive as well.
I think it's how you're building those relationships in each of those sort of like spheres. And so when it comes to media relations, you know, you've built up a relationship with that journalist, or when they see that you've either replied or you've pitched in, they're going to want to feature you or go, oh, actually, this could be interesting. So yeah, it's, for me, there's so many opportunities there, and definitely media relations is such a huge part of that. It's still one of the biggest drivers of what we do, but it's not what we do.
And so next question is, what do you think are PR's biggest challenges then?
Showing the value, because as business owners, we are genuinely going to look at, oh, that's money going out. Whether you're paying for a freelancer, whether you're doing it yourself, that is time, effort, resources that is taking you away from other activities in your business. So, you know, when you see that money going out, I think quite naturally you're going to wonder, well, where was the return on that? You know, what can I see? Where did that get me? And it's so hard, because you could plant a seed with PR, you know, that story is fermenting, and it's that no like trust factor between you and that customer. So where in the line does it convert? You know, could it be that along with maybe a piece of direct mail makes sure that, yeah, absolutely, we then convert that customer, or we're driving people back to the website? So how would you know? So I think that is the biggest challenge for a lot of businesses, but the savvy businesses, I believe, understand that. You know, like they will either put methods in place, and we'll talk about that in like one of the episodes for sure, but they will look at ways of tracking it and actually coinciding, right, I know we did a PR push, so therefore I know that we've seen uplift, or we've seen sign-ups, or that was a really good campaign. But I think that is the ultimate challenge for PR, is actually trying to, when you've got it's about sentiment, it's about that no like trust factor. How do you put a figure on that, you know? So I think that is the biggest challenge that PR as an industry faces.
And final question then is, why do we need PR today then?
Well, I don't know how you can not have PR today, because, or a PR mindset even. So for me, I think that, you know, we've just seen last year, like perhaps one of the most horrendous years that anyone will have to go through. And it's those relationships that have like pulled us through, like through our networking, referrals, when we've had to change how we're communicating, how that's impacting our workforce. Are we communicating really well with them? Do they feel trusted? Do they feel safe? So you need all of these elements of PR in your business, I think, to survive and thrive for sure. I think as well, from why we need it today, there's so many answers to that question. And I would honestly say that we need to step up as leaders, as business owners, like our own leaders, in whatever pocket that may be, to whatever industry that may be, to globally. You know, we all need to step up as our own leaders. We need to cut through the noise. And you cannot do that unless you get to know that person. You build that relationship, you build up that reputation, and that drives the referrals, as well as, you know, obviously direct marketing and sales. I think that for me, understanding PR and what you do at every level, and understanding how it supports every level of your marketing, but also how it drives sales, for me, is super important. So yeah, that to me is where I'm coming from.
Excellent. Well, I think that rounds up all the questions I had for you today. But we did say this we'll keep it sort of short on this one, and then, you know, as a kind of intro and starter, and then carry on to sort of go over the next series discussing all the different aspects of PR.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you have any questions, if you have, you know, any thoughts, or I'd love to hear what your barriers are as well, because, you know, sometimes people, again, I'll have clients that come up to me and say, oh, I think we should be doing this. Like, it's time for PR. We need to launch. We need to be big, and we need to be out there. We need to create a lot of noise, but they haven't got the news really, or the angle that would make it relevant. And they're not really thinking about their audience. They're just thinking about, oh, let me just shout. But they're not really thinking about the relational point. That's not even a word. The relationship with their audiences. Not enough coffee. And
have another cuppa.
I will do. But or they're not realizing that we have other channels, and I think that is the beauty of it. Before, we had like 4 newspapers, and that newspaper used to tell you what was hot, what was not, or, you know, when you made it into that paper, like, everyone read it. Well, consumers are so divided in where their attention is being spent right now, that you can't actually guarantee that you're going to be in a paper and it's going to have the same conversion nowadays, sadly, which is why media partnerships are crucial, or working with journalists and getting the message across in the right way, but building those relationships, so appearing several times, not just that one-off hit, and in several different titles. So yeah, it's much more fragmented.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll have to cut this short. There's so much noise in the background. I've been muting myself, but yeah, I can't stay open and mute for long. So yeah, but thank you so much. It's really, really good intro to PR, and looking forward to the following series.
Fab. Yeah, we'll put some. What I'll do is, at the end of it, same as your like website, there's so many aspects of it that actually will pull them all together and sort of connect them, but ultimately, and have other people, so it's not just me in between. But yeah, absolutely, I feel that there's so much to cover in answer to your questions that hopefully you might find of use and help.
Excellent. All right, well, we'll see you guys same time next week. Thank you so much. Thanks to the viewers for watching. Do leave all your questions and comments below, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.